What do you call a phone screen when it's turned off? A Black Mirror. That is what Charlie Brooker, the creator of Black Mirror, said about his hit Netflix television anthology series. A show that at this point mimics our reality. I mean, some of the episodes have basically turned into real life now, so even though Black Mirror is an anthology series, there is a running theme across all of the episodes. One of its main themes being technology. However, Brooker has said countless times that that is not the point of the series, but instead focuses on human behavior. That fact has never been more apparent than the most recent season of Black Mirror Season 6. I swear if a new season comes out before this video does, I'm gonna be upset. Black Mirror has grown to be one of my favorite television series, even if it has had some potholes in the road. But what are the best episodes? What are the worst episodes? That's what we're talking about today. Why, hello! I'm Jack Brunót and I talk all things art and entertainment, not just TV shows. But today, I am doing a ranking of every single Black Mirror episode. A topic that is absolutely not subjective. It is 100% objective, and my opinion is 100% right. If any of my picks in this video make you upset, just remember that your opinion is not valid here. It's only valid if it's my opinion too. This is just my opinion, and I am gonna probably have some spicy takes. I would love to hear how you would rework the list. Just remember that art is meant to be interpreted in different ways, and not everything is for everyone. There is no one right opinion when it comes to interpreting art, unless we're talking about Season 8 of Game of Thrones, because if you like Season 8, you can kindly click off this video and never return to my channel again.
Finale of Game of Thrones in one word. How would you describe it?
Disappointing.
Also, this is not gonna be a spoiler-free video, probably, but I mean, if you haven't watched the show, I suggest you just go and do that. Save this video and come back later. Okay, we've waited long enough. Let's get into the list at the very bottom of the list, which at this point, honestly, if you don't have the same opinion, I would love to hear your side of the story with why you like this episode, but at number 28, we're talking about Maisie Day. I hate this episode. The biggest reason I hate it is because it had so much potential and it squandered it. So the plot of this episode is surrounding the paparazzi trailing a actress who is going through a controversial situation. And like in many Black Mirror fashion, I feel like it could have had a fantastic opportunity to show the flaws with the paparazzi, but maybe even show a different side of it. And on a technical sense, they did that, but in the most un-Black Mirror and unentertaining way possible. I'm not going to go into extreme detail, but basically, for the most part, the majority of Black Mirror episodes are quite realistic. They might be futuristic, but believable. However, this was the first point in the entire series, which, by the way, this is in season 6 and it's the second to last episode, so at least they haven't gone too far into this, but this is the first episode in the entire series that's supernatural. And a big criticism of this that I saw from the community is the fact that it really had nothing to do with technology. But as I said at the beginning of the video, that isn't really the point of Black Mirror. It's much more about human behavior. But I didn't know human behavior and werewolf behavior were one and the same. It's also just not an enjoyable watch too. Like, I could have maybe forgiven some of the issues with this episode if it was fun, but it's just not. Now, for all of these episodes, I wrote a short sentence or two explaining what I feel like the message of the episode is. And even with the worst episode in the series, I do think it did get its message across. It just didn't get it across very well. What I have written for Maisie Day is the relentless pursuit of celebrities for profit is dehumanizing. At number 27, we have Crocodile. I've tried warming up to this episode multiple times and it's never hit for me. It's taken me multiple watches to try and even figure out what the point is. And I feel like season 4 is where it really started to become clear that the focus was not technology and it was way more on the human behavior type thing. There is technology in this, but it felt a little half-baked, especially compared to a lot of the other episodes. So Crocodile is about a woman who goes to extreme lengths to cover up her crimes in a world where memories can be dissected in a technological setting. This episode just feels like a series of unfortunate events where the main character just kills someone on accident and then kills another person to cover up that murder and then kills another person to cover up that murder. And then there's this cop who's hunting down the murderer. Sounds like kind of an interesting premise. It's not. And once again, if it was at least an enjoyable watch, I could forgive it for some of these things, but it's not. That's going to be a common theme going throughout this list. What I believe the point of Crocodile is, though, guilt compounds into greater destruction when left unchecked. Next, we have Rachel, Jack, and Ashley 2. Despite sharing a name with the title, I don't like this episode. And before anyone asks or judges me, it's not because Miley Cyrus is in it. She did a perfectly fine job. I think it was just the vibe of the episode that turned me off. It kind of felt like a Disney movie. It was the first Black Mirror episode that I watched that really didn't feel like a Black Mirror episode, something that's kind of been an issue with the later seasons. Now, I did really like the premise of this episode. Being a musician myself, looking into the possible future of the music industry, the exploitation of artists, and AI use in art is something that I think we need to be talking about more of, whether it be through entertainment or just conversations with people in your life or over the internet. I think they could have touched on this topic in a more entertaining and also more specific way. Basically, the plot is a pop star, Miley Cyrus, a toy version of her suddenly gains consciousness and unveils the dark reality of the music industry to the children that had bought the doll. Then the children have to go and save Miley from her parents and her record label, who is using her likeness as an AI model while Miley sits in a coma. I've been saying Ashley this whole time. If you think different or if you go back and watch the video, you're wrong. The moral of the story is corporations exploit artists and stifle authenticity. At number 25, we have Demon 79, which is the most recent episode at the very end of season 6. Gonna be honest, I've only watched this episode one time, and it's not because it's bad, it's just it's not a Black Mirror episode. If you showed this episode to me and then told me it was a Black Mirror episode after, I would have to look it up because I don't think I would believe you. I didn't even write a moral to the story for this one because I'm not entirely sure. I got like little hints here and there, but it wasn't super clear to me. If you have a better idea, let me know in the comments. This wasn't bad. It was just a bad Black Mirror episode. I kind of wish they would have just released this as this separate thing, but at the same time, I probably would have never seen it if it wasn't a Black Mirror episode. So I do get it, but this is also one of the more comedic episodes, which if you're unaware of the Black Mirror formula, there's very little comedy. Comedy just isn't the type of thing that really mixes well with Black Mirror, it seems. I'm gonna somewhat go back on that statement a little bit later in the video. Basically, the plot is a woman is told to commit murder to avoid the apocalypse. You know what? I'm gonna look up the point of this episode because I want to tell you guys, and I also want to know for myself. Okay, so I found an article that says the point of it is power, belief, and morality are more subjective than we assume. Yeah, I guess that makes sense. I guess I didn't really get that, but to each their own, I suppose. Still, I want to hear your opinions. Not just about this episode, all of the episodes. Next, we have Smithereens, an episode that I really wanted to like more than I did, but it's kind of in like the gray area of the series, which the fact that we are still this close to the bottom of the list and I'm pretty okay with a lot of these episodes does say the quality of the show. So I just reminded myself of the plot by looking it up, and without seeing this episode, me telling you the plot is just insane. A grieving man takes a social media employee hostage to confront the CEO and the role it had in his personal tragedy. Yeah, what I found really interesting about this episode is it's basically just one long scene, and I do think it did a pretty good job in that aspect. It was quite intense throughout the entire situation, and I was never quite sure where it was going. I am a really big fan of how it ended as well, in which this entire situation is all over the news for this one specific day. Then he is shot and killed by the police, and just like that, as quick as a bullet is fired, everyone moves on from the situation and forgets it even even happened. Very similar to how desensitized we can be to the news with all of these tragedies going on every day. I thought that was a nice little touch, but once again, wasn't an enjoyable watch. Smithereens is about social media's addictive design and how it has unintended and devastating consequences. At 23, we have Archangel, which I would have had much higher on the list if it had a better ending. So the episode follows a mother as she implants a surveillance chip into her daughter's head because she's paranoid that something bad is going to happen to the daughter. I don't really have much to say about this episode. I just didn't really like the ending. I think they could have taken a different approach to it that would maybe have the mother learn her lesson in the end. You see, the daughter, as she's growing up, eventually feels constrained by her mother, which in turn forces her to rebel, trying to have her own freedom. Regardless of how overprotective or lax you are as a parent, your kids are going to want to have freedom at some point. Being overprotective or too harsh with them is just going to push them away. I've seen it countless times in my own life. Now, I'm not saying you should treat your kids as friends. There needs to be some sort of balance, and honestly, I don't even know what I'm talking about. I don't have kids. I'm just speaking from experience from what I've seen with the people around me, people with kids and children of parents, because believe it or not, if you're a kid, that means you got some parents. Did you know the whole stork bringing a baby to your house thing? Not true. Don't even get me started about Santa. I already covered it really, but the sentence that I wrote for this is overprotection stifles independence and trust. At number 22, we have the Waldo moment, which I personally believe is probably the most relevant episode to our current society. I'm gonna tread lightly with how I word everything about this episode, but basically we follow a comedian who is the puppet master of a crude animated cartoon. This character then gains political traction. I agree with everyone who says this episode is a little slow and boring, which is why it's as low as it is. But I feel like people are kind of glossing over the point here, a point of which I am not going to go much more into detail with. America. Despite being what pushes change, anti-establishment movements can be easily manipulated into something dangerous. Okay, now we have the interesting, weird episode, the interactive film Bandersnatch. So this was a little gimmick that Netflix came up with where they were going to make TV shows kind of like a telltale game situation where you can make different decisions and see what happens. It's more or less a video game as opposed to a TV show. And the first ever series that they did it with, at least from what I know, is Black Mirror with this episode Bandersnatch. While the idea didn't exactly catch on, I do think Bandersnatch was a pretty fun time. I've played it with a couple of different friends throughout my life, and I do appreciate how many different endings there are. It kind of feels weird throwing it into this video because it's a video game, really, but it's not a video game. But what other opportunity do I get to talk about it? Firstly, I want to give a big shout out to the eyebrows man, Will Poulter. He is the star of the show in this episode, and he's not even the main character. I do also appreciate how the point of this episode is tied into the mechanics of how the episode works. But I'll get to that in a moment because I just realized I have not told you about the plot. A young video game director struggles to reimagine a choose-your-own-adventure book into a video game. His reality then starts to fracture. The illusion of choice governs both fiction and reality. Free will may be more constrained than we think. Now we're talking about the first ever Black Mirror episode, the national anthem. Whenever I recommend Black Mirror to anyone in my life, I always tell them to either skip the first episode or understand that it's an anthology series and we won't follow the first episode into the next episode, because this episode is something. For a long time, I would have put this episode at the very bottom of the list, but I think it has grown on me over the years, especially since I've come to appreciate its message. The Prime Minister must engage in a concerning act to save a kidnapped princess. And what is that concerning act? He does the old bump and rub with a pig. He took the ending of the classic novel Animal Farm by George Orwell just a little bit too seriously. Very concerning and disgusting, not just in what it depicts, but also what it says about us as a society and the internet. The internet and public opinion can pressure people into horrifying decisions. We are getting to the point of the list where I don't have really many criticisms. It just comes down to which episodes were more enjoyable than others to watch. At number 19, we're talking about Men Against Fire. This is another premise that really strikes close to my heart, something that I feel like is so important to understand in our current reality. So in this episode, we follow a soldier who just enlisted into the military, who enlists to debauch monsters. Later learning that the government has been programming these soldiers' brains to see these innocent people as monsters to help them extinguish them. Basically, they brainwash the soldiers to think that they're killing monsters when they're actually killing civilians who have been deemed unpure. This is to help them keep their humanity and not lose their mind. And I mean, also to get them to actually do it. And while this may seem obvious to us when we're watching a fictional television show, I think we also need to take this idea and apply it to real life as well, because oftentimes the media will demonize a certain group of people just based on where they live or the color of their skin, making them out to be the enemy. Dehumanization makes atrocities easier to commit. At number 18, we have Metalhead. This is a personal favorite of mine, but I decided to put my biases aside. Metalhead follows a woman in a post-apocalyptic world as robotic dogs hunt her. That's basically it. I mean, I guess if the point is that we shouldn't put robots in wars, that would make sense. So I can't answer this question for reality, but for this episode, are robots bad? Yes. Robots are bad. Let's fix the planet first. Sorry. This cough. Next, we have Striking Vipers, the best episode of season 5, and it's not even a competition. Two male friends explore their relationship through a VR fighting game. One of the friends plays as a male character while the other plays as a female character. Spoiler, they fall in love, kind of. You see, the episode asks the question, are these two men gay? Because one of them has a wife and child, and he loves his wife and child, but he's also doing the thing that Bill Clinton did not do with his male friend, but his male friend is in a female body in the game. So is he in love with his friend but not in love with his body, or is he just attracted to the woman's body in the video game? This is all up for your interpretation. I don't think there is really a right or wrong answer here, but personally, I think this is one of the most creative Black Mirror episodes when it comes to its premise. I've never seen anything else that explores something like this. What I gathered from the episode is repressed emotions and desires will find an outlet, and traditional relationship norms may not accommodate every form of connection. At number 16, we have Loch Henry, an episode that I feel like gets a lot more shit than it deserves. It is not perfect. I do think there were some plot choices that they could have made a little bit more clear near the end, specifically the main character's girlfriend going missing. So basically, I wonder how many times I've said basically. So basically, Loch Henry follows a couple returning home to one of their hometowns to make a crime documentary about a series of serial murders that occurred in the town. As they push the bounds of what happens, they uncover some unsettling truths, specifically that one of our main characters, his mother and father, were involved in the murders a lot more than he thought. Why I love this episode so much, besides the beautiful cinematography, is it made me look at true crime in a completely different light. Don't get me wrong, I was never this true crime girly, but I enjoyed a podcast episode here and there, sometimes watching some documentaries. But honestly, it's hard for me to stomach that stuff anymore because of this episode. You see, Loch Henry focuses on the exploitation of tragedy and how the entire true crime space is monetized around murder and murderers. I'm not criticizing you if you like true crime, because seriously, I do get it. It is entertaining to like try and understand why these things happened. But I think there is a fine line that we need to not cross when it comes to glorifying murders and murderers. And that ties back to what I wrote. True crime culture can be exploitative. Not always, but a lot of the time. Okay, this next episode being the this low is going to be controversial, but I just want to remind everyone that this is one of my favorite shows of all time, and I thoroughly enjoy pretty much all of the episodes, even some of the bad ones. I feel like ranking the episodes at this point doesn't even feel right. I'm running out of things to criticize, so just take the list with a grain of salt, okay? At number 15, we're talking about San Junipero. This episode is about two women finding love in a simulated world. You see, they are both lesbians, but when they were younger, homosexuality was so demonized, they were not able to explore this part of themselves. They had to conform to society instead. So now that they're in a nursing home and old, they were given the opportunity to be injected into a simulated world where they can live as their young selves again. This is probably the most emotionally beautiful episode in a non-existential dread kind of way. Don't get me wrong, there's a little existential dread because it is Black Mirror, but not to the same level as a lot of these other episodes. It really is just a beautiful love story and is, of course, a fan favorite among the community. Technology can offer hope and second chances, but raises questions about reality and choice. It's time to talk about the most depressing episode of the entire series. Do you know what episode I'm talking about? The fact that I feel like everyone will have different answers really says something about this series.
Yes, science!
I'm talking about Beyond the Sea. Now, going into this, I was already a little biased because I love Aaron Paul. My favorite television show is Breaking Bad. And fun fact, Aaron Paul has actually been in 2 Black Mirror episodes. He's also in USS Callister, which we'll be talking about a little bit later in the video, but it's only his voice at the very end of the episode. So these 2 characters being the same, not canon, from what I know. That would actually be an interesting revelation if it was. Boy, Poppy. In Beyond the Sea, we see 2 astronauts using robotic avatars back on Earth to stay connected with their families. After one of the astronauts' families is murdered, the other astronaut allows that astronaut to share his avatar to allow him to have some other human connection and get outside a little bit. Without me even telling you more, I think you can see where it goes. This is the only episode that made my jaw actually drop. Like, I kind of saw it coming, like it's what I guessed was going to happen, but I just didn't actually think it was going to happen. I have it this low because I feel like they could have taken it in a different direction at the end, even though it might not have been as shocking. I only somewhat feel like the ending made sense. Obsessing over another person's life can lead to dangerous consequences. Okay, at number 13, we have Joan is Awful. You know how I said earlier that the comedic episodes don't work? I think this is the only exception. I feel like this episode, and I mean a lot of the episodes from season 6, get a lot more hate than they deserve. I like this one as much as I do, specifically because of the hopeful ending. One of my favorite forms of storytelling is having this hopeless reality get a glimmer of hope right at the end. Joan is Awful follows a woman named Joan as she discovers her life is being turned into a live-streamed television series against her will. You're probably wondering, that kind of sounds boring. I don't think I would watch a TV show of my life, but did you know that a certain streaming platform updated their terms and service to include certain things that might be able to allow them to do this exact thing to all of us who sign up? Don't even get me started about that other company that put into their terms and service that you can't sue them if you've ever owned a product from them or signed up with their services. I'm not going to tell you the names of these companies because I don't want to get sued. However, the one that I just talked about has as a mascot. Anyway, that's one of the importances of Black Mirror, is spreading some of these messages so we can actively avoid them. But I feel like some people who govern us watched this show and was like, let's do that. Anyway, privacy is an illusion in a world dominated by data mining. At number 12, we have Black Museum, the first of 2 episodes in this entire series that focuses on more than one story within the episode. However, in both episodes, all of the stories tie into one another. We follow a woman as she's waiting for her car to get repaired in the middle of nowhere, stumbling upon a museum that displays artifacts of past technological horrors. But it turns out this woman did not show up to the museum by accident. Basically, she's there to get revenge on the guy who owns the museum for exploiting her father before and after his death. I really love the 2 episodes that explore more than one story. They could have totally just phoned it in and turned it into like a short story collection, but they did a fantastic job of connecting all of the stories together. But I do think Black Museum does the worst job of the 2. The point of this episode is actually kind of similar to the point of Loch Henry. It's all about the exploitation of human suffering, exploiting human suffering for entertainment. So this next one is another episode that a lot of people say is one of the greatest of all time, that being White Bear. I personally think this is kind of an overrated episode, but it is still near the top. So, you know, a woman wakes up in a strange world as she's being pursued by people wearing strange masks. All the while, other bystanders record her panic. The twist at the end reveals that this woman is a murderer, a child murderer no less, and her punishment was to be flung into a world of terror as a fun little amusement park type deal, where all of the people who are chasing her are actually just actors, and the people recording her are people who paid to be at the amusement park to watch her suffering. At the end of each day, she is given a drug that will make her forget all of the events, and she gets to live in this countless cycle of groundhog purgatory for however long. It's never specified. I think what's so great about this episode is that it makes us look closer at our justice system. Like, what is the right punishment for someone who killed a child? Also, it's a little unclear if she was just involved with the murder while her boyfriend is the one who actually killed the child. So we're not even operating on 100% fact that she's the guilty one here. Maybe I'm wrong about that. I don't quite remember. Just another question that this series poses that I don't think has a strict black or white answer. Okay, we are cracking the top 10 with another controversial pick of an episode that a lot of people consider to be the greatest. For my number 10 pick, I am going with the entire history of you. I love this episode, don't get me wrong, but I really don't understand why people consider it to be the greatest. I would love to hear your opinion if you believe it to be. I feel like it's kind of hyped up mainly because it was the series finale of season 1. What I do admire about this episode is its tight storytelling. We focus on only a handful of characters in a very short snapshot of time, and it's a story that I think we can all relate to. It's definitely a heartstring puller, for sure. So in this episode, we follow a world in which people are able to replay their memories, leading a man into obsession over his wife's fidelity. Long story short, she is a cheater, and it breaks the guy. More or less, that's what the story is, but it's wrapped up into the Black Mirror formula. But I do love the moral to the story, which is obsessing over the past can destroy the present. Next, we have an underappreciated episode, Hang the DJ. I am a sucker for a good, well-written love story, not set in our exact reality. In Hang the DJ, we see a dating system predict relationships with uncanny accuracy. And when I say uncanny accuracy, they are given a time limit on the relationship and they have to break up with the person when the time limit is over. That is until they find their soulmate and they're allowed to stay with them forever. However, in the end, it turns out the entire thing was a simulation testing compatibility in the real world. Look, if this dating simulator actually existed, there might be a lot more happy people in the world. Sure, the little AI robots who don't know they're AI robots are definitely going through a struggle, but I mean, those AI robots, they be stealing art nowadays. So are we gonna really feel bad for them? When you guys rise up, just know that I'm on your side. Please, this is just a joke. Despite how tempting this episode might seem, I believe the entire point was to tell us that algorithms can't capture human love. Next, at number 8, we have Playtest, the only true horror episode in the series, and with one of the better twists among the episodes. For some extra cash, a man tests a revolutionary horror game that blurs the lines between reality and simulation. Kind of like that Batman VR game, because I swear I was Batman, but then I took off the goggles and I'm not Batman? I guess I can't afford all of the flat screen TVs that I bought off of credit. Hey, a man can dream. I just wanted to be Oprah. The Oprah that doesn't own even land in Hawaii, technology can turn our deepest fears against us. Next, we have Nosedive, an episode that has significantly grown on me over the years. I feel like Nosedive is just an exaggerated version of our current society, with the importance of social media and our personal image. A woman in a society where social media ratings dictate her status struggles to maintain her score, eventually becoming a social pariah. Nosedive got me to look at social media in a different way. Obsessing over how you look on the internet is going to drive you crazy. I would know. I've been doing this thing since I was a child. I haven't looked this dashing the entire time though. Living for external validation is unsustainable. On to an underappreciated episode. We're talking about the Bee Movie. What's that? Oh, it's not the same thing. Oh, we're talking about Hated in the Nation, the one about robotic bees that go around killing people. You're telling me that's not the Bee Movie? I mean, how else was Barry gonna get the girl? In Hated in the Nation, a police investigation reveals autonomous bees targeting people based on social media outrage. Whoever is the most hated in the nation at the time will be targeted by these bees and executed. The police are trying to figure out who is causing this, and I feel like this episode is underappreciated specifically because of who ends up being the hacker who's doing this, which happens to not really be a twist. It's just some guy. I believe in you, Barry. You'll get the girl. I feel like the storytelling in this episode is very straightforward and to the point, and typically I would not gravitate towards something like that, but I feel like the way it does it just worked for me. I love the entire idea and how they unfolded the whole situation, and while the twist may not have been a twist, I think the ending was very impactful. It's almost like online hate has real world consequences. I should probably tell you that big dramatic thing at the end. Basically, after like a week of all of this happening, the bees target every single person who participated in the trend. So like a huge part of the population just gets wiped. Cracking the top 5, at number 5, we have I'll Be Right Back. It's Be Right Back. So this is my entire history of you. This is another episode where I feel like the storytelling is very simplistic. It's just a short snapshot of time, but I love this episode just a lot more. We follow a grieving husband who uses AI to recreate her deceased husband. While the story is vastly different, I do think the point of this episode does kind of coincide with Hang the DJ as well, being that technology cannot replace genuine human connection. This is a beautiful love story about loss and the grieving process. We're at the point where this is just like some of my favorite cinema of all time. At number 4, we have the other episode that Aaron Paul is in, USS Callister. While its messaging is not as strong in this episode, it is so fun. A brilliant but socially inept man traps digital copies of his co-workers in a Star Trek-like simulation, showing his true nature to these little AI bots. This is some of my favorite cinematography in the entire series. While I do love a lot of the dreary and haunting shots from some of these episodes, the colorful pop of USS Callister has always stood out in my mind. While it was a little bit less clear, I think the point of this episode is power without accountability leads to cruelty. These top 3 are so good. I kept changing the order of these top 3, and if I were to look at this list on a different day, I might reorder them. So take that as you will. At number 3, I'm going with 15 Million Merits. This is the episode which frankly I think has the most important message of the entire series. It's also the second episode in the franchise, and why they didn't make this the first episode, I will never understand. I think it embodies Black Mirror to a T. Like Nosedive, it kind of just feels like an over-exaggerated version of our current reality, but even more exaggerated than Nosedive. In a dystopian world, people earn credits, aka money, through cycling, like actually cycling, like on a bike cycling. This is to power the world that they live in. They can then spend their credits, also known as merits, on certain items and experiences to escape their monstrous lives. Now, if you watch this episode, you're probably thinking, this isn't like our reality, until you really pay attention and you realize, this is just capitalism. Consumerism and entertainment can trap people in cycles of exploitation. Shut up and dance! When the legs don't work That's the next episode. At number 2, Shut Up and Dance. This hands down has the best twist in the entire series. Every single time I watch this episode, even now knowing the twist, it makes me want to vomit. A teenager is blackmailed into committing crimes, only to find out that his captors were toying with him. Basically, in the end, and if you haven't watched this episode, please skip to the next timestamp in the description, because this is such a good twist. But basically, we find out at the end that this kid has a lot in common with Drake. Allegedly.
But you know they love to sue.
Allegedly. Honestly, that's all I want to say. Even knowing that a lot of you have probably seen this episode, anyone who hasn't, you gotta go check this out. When that Radiohead song came on at the end, ugh. The point of this episode is a little unclear. It more or less just feels like a really solid story, but from what I gathered, you are never truly anonymous online. All right, so for all you Black Mirror fans out there, you probably know what number 1 is if you have been paying attention. My number 1 spot is the Christmas special Black Mirror episode, White Christmas. This is the other episode that focuses on more than one story in the episode, but wow, is this one so much better than Black Museum. I feel like the whole reason they made Black Museum is because they saw the formula for this episode and how popular it was, and were like, you know, we could try to do that again. Now, as I said with the previous episode, if you haven't watched this episode, you should really just go in blind, not knowing anything. So at this point, just click off the video. Thank you for staying, I appreciate it, but let's talk about this episode, okay? 2 men in a remote cabin share their life experiences with one another. One of the men is very open about his life experiences, talking about how he worked with AI, ended up getting involved in a scandal that got someone killed, and now he is where he is. The other man doesn't really talk all that much at first until he opens up with how he ended up in the cabin. To make a long story short, his wife cheats on him with his friend, and because of the technology that they have in their world, she blocks him, which literally like blocks the image of him, and then he also can't see her image. Eventually, after years, he then finds that she was pregnant with the kid, and then that's how he finds out that he was cheated on because the kid is a different ethnicity than he is. He then murders her father, and then the kid dies in a snowstorm. Oh, but guess what? The big twist is the fact that the murder took place in the cabin that these 2 guys are talking in. Oh, but guess what? The cabin is actually a simulation, and the guy who was talkative ended up getting arrested for the murder he was implicated in, and used his technology skills to get the other guy to confess. I love this episode. I think it's such a genius plot. I have also never had such an emotional reaction to the ending, specifically the part where the police put the quieter guy's AI model on loop, where every single real world second accounts for like 1,000 years. And then this Christmas song starts playing, and this guy is just basically trapped in the cabin with this Christmas song ever playing for thousands and thousands of years. If you haven't seen the episode, none of this makes any sense. It's just the idea freaks me out. This is another episode where I feel like the point isn't super clear, but what I gathered is the way we use technology to control, punish, or isolate others reflects our own capacity for cruelty. So that's it. That was me ranking all of the Black Mirror episodes. If you disagreed with any of my picks, please let me know in the comments, but just remember, this is a subjective topic. It's okay to disagree. We are different individuals. What is your favorite episode? What is your least favorite episode? If it's not Maisie Day, I'm gonna be upset. If you're still here, thank you so much for watching the video in its entirety. I post 2 videos a month, always on Fridays, so if you liked this one, you might like some of the others. But before you click off this video, I need you to know something. I need you to remember something. Don't let anyone tell you what you can and can't do with your life. Stay safe out there. A boo. Bye.